Good morning. Please turn to Ecclesiastes 1, verse 1 and 2. Ecclesiastes 1, verse 1 and 2. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity.
May be seated. Let me encourage you this morning to be turning there with me in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Some of you may need to use a table of contents to remember where this book is, and that's okay, but go ahead and do that and open up there with me. We're going to begin this morning, over the next several weeks, a new sermon series that is going to be based right out of this book, the book of Ecclesiastes. This is one of the books that is known as wisdom literature. Contained within our Old Testament, and it's a book that many people aren't sure what to do with, and so what they decide to do is just not read it, just to sort of ignore it and move past it to something else that they can understand a little bit better. And there are some difficult passages within this book, but there's so much wisdom for us to learn from, and so we're going to be spending at least the next several weeks looking at this book together. This book is one that is oftentimes very unpleasant to read. It serves a very important role in the structure of the Old Testament as wisdom literature, but it's a book that really forces you to wrestle with some deep questions about life. And it forces you to sort of look in the mirror and ask yourself, what am I really doing with my life? If you're not careful, this book is one that'll lead you right to a midlife crisis. And leads you to asking yourself, what am I doing with my life? Is what I'm doing, is it what I'm supposed to be doing? Does my life really even matter? Why am I here? Asking those types of questions is what this book is designed to do. And so I want us to just think about this book from that kind of a perspective and consider just this passage. It's right here in the very first chapter of this book. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. The paraphrase of this, in a few generations, nobody will remember you, and nobody will even remember your children. Now, this guy is a motivational speaker. You just read this in the opening chapter, and you think, yeah, I'm going to go back to the Gospels, and I'm going to read more about Jesus, right? There are some things that we read in this book that are uncomfortable, and they make us have conversations with ourselves and with others, and maybe we don't want to do. Authorship of this book is typically attributed to King Solomon. I think it's important to point out that nowhere in this book does the author identify himself by name. But there are many contextual reasons why Solomon is the traditional viewpoint as far as the author. This man claimed to have been a king over Israel at Jerusalem, was one who had abundant wealth, was one who was extremely wise, and so there are many reasons why people view Solomon as the author of this book. And he refers to himself, as Nathan read for us at the beginning of this book, as the preacher, or some of your translations might say teacher. It comes from the Hebrew word kolet, that means to gather, to assemble. Somebody who gathered people together and then spoke to them. The teacher or the preacher. And that's how he's going to refer to himself throughout the entirety of this book. So regardless of whether or not Solomon was the author, we're meant to read this book through the eyes of Solomon, or a Solomon-like figure, somebody who was king over Israel at Jerusalem, who was abundantly wealthy, who was extremely wise, who was very powerful, somebody who had essentially conquered this life. He had done everything that you could do. He had achieved the pinnacle of success, and now he's looking back on his life and saying, what is it that really matters? And what is it that I've spent so much of my life trying to do that doesn't have any meaning? That doesn't have any value. And there's a phrase that is found in this book repeatedly, almost 30 times in this book. You're going to find a phrase, depending on your translation, that will say, under the sun, or on earth. And it's important that we understand what the author, Solomon, likely is doing with this phrase. It's what he's trying to get you and I to wrestle with, throughout the entirety of this book is, what is your life without God? What is your life just under the sun? What is your life on this earth if this is all that there was, and there was no God? Then is there really any purpose to your life at all? And that's the uncomfortable question that he begins to confront his readers with. And Ecclesiastes forces his readers to wrestle with that reality of, if there is no God, or if I'm living my life apart from God, then does my life have a point? Does my life have a purpose? And as a result of that goal, much of this book can seem very negative, dark, hopeless. It helps as we read the book for us to understand what the author is trying to accomplish. And so he's going to work his way through this book of showing that there is meaning in life and there is purpose, but that you can only find that purpose in God. Now, I want us to spend a little bit of time this morning just focusing on one word that if we miss this word, we're going to miss the book. And the word is found there in verse 2 that Nathan read for us this morning, vanity, as the ESV translates it. Some of your translations may have the word futile in its place, or maybe even worthless or meaningless, depending on which translation you're looking at. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. He begins his book that way. Isn't that a book that you say, man, I just can't wait to read more of this? Everything is vanity, everything is futile, everything is worthless and meaningless. So there's no meaning in life. Is that really what this book is telling me? And whenever you flip to the end of the book, that's a typo. It should be Ecclesiastes 12, verse 8. They flip to the end of the book, and he ends the book very much the same way as he begins the book. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. What I want you to see is that this book is very intentionally arranged around this Hebrew term. And this particular Hebrew term is found 38 times in these 12 chapters. The book begins with it, the book ends with it, and it says this is what life is. And so what I want us to do is take just a moment and say, what is he really saying here? Because if we miss the meaning of this, we're going to miss the picture and the portrait of the book. Because what many scholars will bring about in their commentaries as they dive into this word is that this is a word for which there is no English equivalent. And that's why our translations struggle to translate it, and many of them handle it in different ways. And they all sort of handle maybe one element of what this word is. But in Hebrew, the word literally means that of vapor, breath, smoke, something like that. That this is the picture of what all of life is. And really, there's a couple of different ways that you can think about your life being this way. The Hebrew term is hevel. That's that word that you translated there as vanity or futile or worthless or meaningless. It's the Hebrew term hevel. And the author of this book says all of life is hevel. It's breath, it's smoke, it's a vapor. And there's a couple of different ways that we need to understand what he's saying there. One is the temporary nature of it. It's the temporary nature of it. We understand that. James would famously write about that in his book, in James chapter 4, whenever he would question those who were planning their day today and they're planning their day tomorrow without saying, if the Lord wills. They were going throughout their life assuming that they're going to be here tomorrow. And he says, what is your life? It is but a vapor. Well, that's part of this word hevel in Hebrew, is the understanding that life it's something that's here and then it's gone. It's temporary, but that's not all of the meaning of this word. It also carries with it the idea that it's something that you cannot get a hold of. You can't grasp it. You can't control it. And in many ways, you can't understand it. And so as we read through the book of Ecclesiastes, this book of wisdom, it serves the purpose of making us face whether or not we're building our lives on the right things. And it also has a way of naming some of the struggles and the questions of life that you have asked before and that people have asked you. Such as, if I love God and I'm trying my best to live for Him, why do bad things keep happening to me? And the writer of Ecclesiastes would say that's hevel. That's something that you're not going to be able to grasp. That's something you're not going to be able to understand. We might try to simplify our theology to where it can fit on a bumper sticker, and it seems very simple all of the time. But the author of Ecclesiastes would say life isn't simple, and there are going to be things that you can't understand. Whenever you bring your newborn baby home, and you're so excited to begin this life as parents with this child, and then you blink and they're driving. And you say, what is that? The Ecclesiastes writer would say that's hevel. It's here and then it's gone. It's temporary. Whenever we begin to pour everything that we have into our career, into our work, and we say, I want to achieve this level of success. I want this pay scale. I want this position. I want this title. I want this ability at work. And you begin picking up extra shifts, and you begin taking extra classes, and you never miss a day of work, and yet you're passed over for somebody who's less qualified. And you say, what is that? The author of Ecclesiastes would say it's hevel. That there are these things that you're never going to be able to control in life. No matter how much you try to control the controllables, life is outside of your control. And so throughout this book, the author slowly works to showing us a way to live a life that is more joyful, but along that way, sometimes before we get to the joy, it's going to hurt first. And he begins this book by confronting us with some things that we often try to hold up as the ideal for the way to live, that in reality leaves us feeling empty inside. And so a brief survey of this opening chapter. I want you to look with me at verse 3 through 7. Excuse me, Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 3 through 7, where he talks about the redundant or the repetitive nature of life. He'd say, what does a man gain by all of the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down, and then it hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around the wind goes, and on its circuits the winds return. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. Talking about just the cycle of life and how everything becomes so repetitive and so redundant. It's like we've seen this story before. You know, we've lived in our house long enough now that we have had the joy of replacing every appliance in our home. And we finally did that. We finished it off last year and said, all right, we've replaced everything in this house. Now I can probably get a little bit of a reprieve. And then our air conditioning unit went out again this last week. Hey, I don't like being an adult. It's not fun. You say, I've already done this before, right? They should just make things that you buy it once and it lasts forever. But we know we're going to have to do this again. That's just the way that life goes. And the sun rises and the sun sets, and then it rises and then it sets. And you say, this is just monotony. It seems like the world isn't going anywhere. What is the point of this life? Well, he's having you wrestle with that question because without God, there's really not much of a point. Think about all of the repetition within your life that grows very wearisome. You do the dishes in your house, and you turn around and the sink is full again. You finish the laundry in your home, and then the laundry basket is filled up. You go out and you spend hours mowing and weed eating, and then you sit on your front porch and you can hear the grass growing. And you say, it's just going to be a minute before I've got to get out there and I've got to do it again. You say, what's the point of this redundant, repetitive cycle of life? Solomon isn't attempting to depress his readers, but to highlight what life without God is like. It feels like this pointless, endless, repetitive cycle. Continuing on, verse 8 through 11, and he talks about how life under the sun is empty. We read these words, all things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. For what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of latter things yet to come among those who are to come after. He says we're never full of experiences. It doesn't matter what you have seen, you want to see more. That's probably true in your life. No matter where you've traveled, there's somewhere that's still on your bucket list. There's somewhere you still want to go. No matter what you've heard, you still want to hear more. You're never satisfied. And every new thing that comes about, well, it may be packaged different, and it may function different, but it's a version of something that has always been here. It's a version of the way that we interact with each other that has always been here, that there's nothing that is new. No matter how much we get, we still crave more. And then what Solomon does, or the author of Ecclesiastes, is he presents the first of several things, and we're going to look at one this morning, and the lesson will be yours, of pursuits that we as people sometimes think, I can find my value in this. And he kicks the props from underneath it and shows you what a house of cards it really is. And the first one is found here in chapter 1, and it's the pursuit of wisdom, or we might say education. If I can just educate myself enough, if I can just learn enough, if I can attain enough knowledge, enough wisdom, then my life is going to mean something. It's going to be good. Now, Solomon, what was true of him, you may remember his story in 1 Kings chapter 3. God gives him an incredible opportunity where God tells Solomon, anything that you ask of me, I'm going to give it to you. And I often wonder, what would I have asked for if I was in that situation? Well, what Solomon does is he recognizes he's not good at discerning. Whenever there's an issue between people, he's not good at getting to the root of how to solve this. He doesn't know always what's right and what's wrong and how to manage people. And so he asks God for wisdom. And because he didn't ask for money, and because he didn't ask for fame and power, and he asked for wisdom, God blessed him to be the wisest man who ever lived. And in addition, he got those other things too. He got the wealth, and he got the power, and he got the fame. But he asked for wisdom, and God gave him wisdom. Solomon, in his life, he thought, if I was just wiser, then that is what I would need within my life. And so he begins this book by talking about the pursuit of wisdom. And he describes in this text that he had applied his heart. In other words, he gave it everything that he had to grow in wisdom, to be able to discern, to be able to know what is right, what is wrong. How can I tell the difference between good and evil? I want to learn all of the answers to all of life's questions. I want to become an expert on everything. And then once I do that, then everything is going to be okay in my life. And what was the end result of that for Solomon? Well, he would say in verse 18 of this chapter, for in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases in sorrow. You know, whenever I was growing up, I would occasionally remind my parents of this verse when I didn't want to do my homework. They didn't let me get away with that. Kids, your parents aren't going to let you get away with that either. In context, Solomon isn't promoting ignorance, but rather he's highlighting that if your hope, your anchor, your identity is in your education, your intellect, your degrees, your academic achievements, your ability to reason, the logic that you have, then you've built your life on sand. I want you to consider just a few areas in your life where maybe you can resonate with the statement that he made, that the more that you learn, the more sorrow that you have. Some of these may not be true for all of you, but I imagine we'll all find our place somewhere. There are some who just love to watch the news, and they want to be informed. They want to be informed about everything that's going on in the world. They don't want to be an uninformed citizen. They want to be an informed citizen. But the more information that you get, does it make you happier in your life? Or does it typically tend to bring the attitude down a little bit? Does it make you more depressed, more anxious, as you learn about things that are happening in the world around you? Some of you, you don't like the news, and you say, I never watch the news, but you're on social media. And so there can be an earthquake on the other side of the world, and something that you in times past would have never even heard of, now you hear about it instantly. You may not watch the news, but you're connected globally. And so you feel the weight of the anxiety of the entire world every time that you open your phone. How does it make you feel? Does it increase your joy, or does it bring more vexation to your life? Does it bring more sorrow to your life? Sometimes all of the information that's in our heads, what it does is it brings more stress to our lives. Some people, another way is some people love to study history. And if you study history, if you just study biblical history, what you find in biblical history is it's almost as if, I've read this story before. Oh, it's because I have. The location was different. But the exact same story has taken place over and over and over. And then you study American history, you study world history, and you begin to see cycles and patterns that happen within humanity. And then you begin to project forward. Well, if I look back and I see where things develop, then what's going to happen for us? And generally, that doesn't bring joy to your heart. Because you see something that is developing, and you know that there's danger coming, but you also know that you can't stop it. You have knowledge, but you also have sorrow. Those who are counselors as a profession, guidance counselors, therapists, sometimes even elders, preachers, who meet regularly with patients, with church members about struggles going on in their life, become aware to a heightened degree of the issues that so many people are facing. And while that individual may not be going through it all, they feel the weight of what others are going through. They have more knowledge. But as that knowledge has increased in proportion to that, so does their sorrow. What the book of Ecclesiastes does is it holds up a mirror for all of us to help us evaluate, what am I pursuing in life? And the first thing that Solomon talks about is wisdom. There are some who hold education and the gaining of knowledge as the highest pinnacle that a human can get. And he says, but the more you do that, the more sorrow you're going to bring to your life. That it's not that education is wrong, but if that is your hope, if that is your anchor, you're building your life on sand. What the author of Ecclesiastes does repeatedly is wanting to point out to his readers that without God, this life is repetitive, this life is empty, it's unsatisfying. But with God, life is a gift. And you have a different perspective that ignites joy within your heart. If we can help you this morning, if we can be of service to you in helping you in your walk, praying for you, helping you to realign the things that you are pursuing so that it brings your soul in closer alignment with what God intends for you. We'd love to be an encouragement for you this morning. If we can help you in your walk, we'd invite you to come as together we stand and sing the song of invitation.